Watch this.
Somebody has to speak up for the unfair treatment, the discrimination.
Well, this would make several somebodies who have spoken up. We have the specifics from the latest lawsuit as another family alleges racism at a West Ada school. Parks and Recreation sounds like a lot of fun, but it's actually a job. Directing Boise Parks and Rec has been one man's job for a long time, and that career is about to close. Friends or foes? After a 10-year-long study, researchers have learned the impacts of cattle sharing the same space as the sage grouse. Last March, when we first brought you the story of the West Ada middle school teacher being asked to remove her "Everyone is Welcome Here" poster from her classroom, we learned it wasn't because of the words on the poster, but the visuals on it. That's at least according to the school district's chief academic officer, Marcus Myers, who repeatedly declined our request for an interview, but had no problem going on a local political podcast a couple days later.
You have things that are almost identical to this. They just don't have multicoloring, and then they don't have the hands that obviously are different shades of skin tone, right? Ranging from white all the way to black.
Yeah. So the text by itself doesn't allow for interpretation. The text by itself communicates a message. Now, it's important to act that way at the same time, but we want to make sure that the interpretation of the visual images, that's the issue that exists here.
The interpretation of the visual images, that's the issue that exists here. The varying skin tones, the different colors of skin. This sentiment about skin tone seems to highlight an underlying problem within the West Ada School District. A few days after we shared Sarah Inama's story, a West Ada family reached out to say they removed both their daughters from another West Ada school just weeks before because of rampant racism they experienced.
I would constantly be hearing like the N-word either to me or like to someone else, and the jokes that would go around like, oh, go pick cotton, or like in my class, like they'd say it to me like, oh, get back to work, or like no one wants you here. Like,
Abby's parents said they repeatedly brought their issues up to the district office, and they told us some steps were being made to remedy the situation. But these weren't just isolated incidences anymore. They were happening daily, so they withdrew their daughters from school. But it doesn't appear to be just a couple of schools, because months earlier, back in October of 2024, according to the Idaho Statesman, nearly 24 parents from 13 West Ada schools sent a letter to the district wanting the trustees to make some changes to its anti-discrimination policy. Then in December, we reported on a lawsuit filed by an Eagle family claiming their daughters faced, quote, continuous harassment for years at Eagle High School. The lawsuit claims they were subjected to racial slurs and humiliation from school staff and students.
I'd start being called the N-word frequently by other students.
Our kids started to like enunciate the N-word at me and like kept saying little more bits of it, like nah, 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 and we were right in front of the teacher's desk.
I was just used to not having an outcome, or not getting help, or not feeling protected. I got used to being scared to go to school, begging my parents not to let me go.
The Hodge family claims the school failed to address their family's concerns about racism. And now we are hearing from another Eagle High family who says their daughter also faced racial discrimination and unfair treatment by the girls' basketball coaches. We learned of the tort claim a couple months ago, but today Aspen Shumpert gets details of the alleged discrimination directly from Brooke Vargas herself.
Back outside to Vargas. She's going to shoot it again in this one.
For 17-year-old Brooke Vargas, basketball has been her passion since she was 5 years old.
It's just a fun sport. I love it. It makes me happy.
She started high school playing for the girls' Owyhee High School basketball team.
We were really proud of her being the only freshman on a varsity team.
But decided to transfer to Eagle High School for a better opportunity and a coach who believed in her.
They welcomed me, for sure.
She says her sophomore season had its ups and downs, and she wished she'd played a little more than she did. But her and her mother, Megan Vargas, believed in the team's head coach, Jeremy Monroe.
He's telling me that basically my junior year is going to be everything I want. So we just stayed positive, and she stayed in it.
I just remember him telling me that I would be his priority.
Brooke says before transferring to Eagle, she heard the school had previous allegations of racial discrimination and harassment.
I thought it was just people, saying things on the internet, but it turned out to be true.
Brooke says she attended the most summer workouts out of anyone on the Eagle team and practiced as a starter leading up to the first game of her junior season. But on the day of the first game in the fall of 2024, she was told by the head coach they were starting another player on the team that was taller.
That was just very hard. As an athlete, that's not something that you want to hear the day of. And so, yeah, that was the first big thing where I was like, wow, he's just pushing me to the side.
During her junior season, Brooke says racial comments were made at practice that left her questioning her place on the team.
The head coach, he started with, I want you to grip the ball so tight, I see white fingertips. And the head coach, or assistant coach, leaned over to me and said, or brown.
And chuckled.
And laughed.
Brooke was the only Hispanic athlete on the team.
It's very hurtful, and it makes me question a lot of things. About Eagle, about my skin color. I can't change my skin color, so it's why would you comment on something like that?
The family says minimal playing time only continued throughout the season. Brooke says coaches held her to a different standard than the white student athletes on the team who hadn't had their playing time cut for poor performance.
He liked to hold me to a one mistake standard, even if I went out there for a minute or two, 5 minutes. Whereas other girls that started or were out there for 30 plus minutes, they were able to make the same mistake over and over again.
And when it came to recruitment opportunities, Brooke says she felt looked over again.
It's just hard because he would ask the other white players what their goals are, and he would go out of their way to do that for them, and not for me.
The Vargas family plans to go to court after the district investigated their allegations of discrimination and unfair treatment by the coaching staff. That investigation claims there was not enough evidence to support the Vargas' allegations.
They want to silence parents. They want to silence the players and students. They want to downplay these incidents. And, if you think something is a racial joke, laugh it off. That's your opinion. But they stick longer with kids. This is something she'll remember for the rest of her life.
The Vargas family says the discrimination affected Brooke's mental health.
I remember just one day at practice, I finally just broke down off to the side because I was like, this is just really hard. I'm giving it my all, and it's just not, he doesn't care. And none of the coaches care, really.
And may have hurt her chances of additional recruitment opportunities because it sent a message to college scouts.
How can you be so great, have wonderful highlight videos, be amazing when we watch you at club tournaments over the summer, but you're not being played by your high school coach?
The family says it was a tough choice to come forward with this, but one they say is necessary to try and change the culture at Eagle High School and within the West Ada School District.
This is the hardest thing I've ever had to go through. And I can say that she is one of the strongest individuals for her age.
They've gotten away with this for way too long, and I hope for fair treatment for all kids throughout West Ada.
The family wants compensation for, quote, lost scholarship opportunities, emotional distress, and retaliation. The Vargas family will be amending their complaint to include what has happened since filing the tort claim in April, including further alleged retaliation during the team's most recent tryouts for next season, placing Brooke on the JV team as a senior with an offer to play in college. They're currently trying to decide as a family what to do, where Brooke will play her senior year, if at all. The district says they won't comment on any pending litigation. I reached out to them for a comment today, and that's what they responded as.
And that's what they've said for all of these lawsuits have been filed against them. What about the coach? Is he still coaching at Eagle High School?
Yeah, he is still coaching at Eagle High School. The district was able to confirm that when I reached out to them today.
Okay, yeah, tough situation to go through. And again, we may not know the outcome of these lawsuits. They've
Right.
been kind of tied up for a little bit, but we'll do our best. All right, thank you very much, Aspen. Well, it's been a series of approvals and reversals. A local homeless shelter now has received the green light from planning and zoning. Plus, 90s are going to stay in your forecast for the rest of the week. We can tell you where you can cool off. More than 300 members of Idaho's Air National Guard, they're also back home. Here's Jude Binkley with the 411.
After several hours of testimony, Boise's Planning and Zoning Committee unanimously approved a new application for a conditional use permit for Interfaith's homeless shelter on State Street. Last night, they presented plans for the new shelter on State Street at the Boise Planning and Zoning hearing. Earlier this year, the Idaho Supreme Court found the Boise City Council improperly approved the project. Interfaith says its new shelter will have more than 200 beds and provide supportive services on site. With temperatures expected to hit the 90s throughout the next week, there are several places in Boise you can go to cool off. That includes City Hall, Boise Public Library locations, the Cathedral of the Rockies, City Light Home for Women and Children, River of Life at the Boise Rescue Mission, and Interfaith Sanctuary. All facilities offer bathrooms, indoor seating, and drinks. You can find more cooling locations across the Treasure Valley at ktvb.com. Last night, the Idaho National Guard held a special welcome home event for the airmen of the 124th Fighter Wing. Back in March, more than 300 Idaho Air National Guard airmen deployed to the U.S. Central Command Area of Responsibility to support combat operations. Family and friends gathered at Gowan Field in Boise with handmade signs, excited to see their loved ones again. Colonel Ryan Richardson, a 124th Fighter Wing commander, said, quote, "We're glad to welcome home our airmen. Their professionalism and dedication to the mission during this deployment adds to the storied history of the wing." And that's the 411 on the 208. I'm Jude Binkley.
His tenure began just after the turn of the century, this last century, but just before the release of the Lord of the Rings franchise. And about the only thing that's lasted longer than those movies has been the career of Boise Parks and Recreation Director Doug Holloway. Well, now, after another busy summer, his 25th with the agency, Doug is set to retire. Loyal viewers will recognize his name and his voice as he has helped share the stories, the upgrades, and the histories of Boise's 100-plus parks. Well, we're going to hear that voice and see that face one more time as Doug reflected on his quarter century with the City of Trees.
I started out in this business. So I started out as director of the Payette County Recreation District back in, and I'm going to date myself here, but 1983. And I actually got the job before I even graduated from college. The previous director had left in like February. I came home from college in May. I still had a semester left. And one day they called me into an office, 3 commissioners of this recreation district, and said, we want to hire you. I would tell anybody that would listen to me when I was 22 years old, I'm going to be the director of Boise Parks and Recreation someday. You know, and I made that not necessarily as a goal, I just said it because I met the director at a softball, it was like a softball meeting in Caldwell. And I was just so enthralled by this guy. I thought he was a celebrity because he ran Boise Parks and Recreation. And I went back and I told my future wife and anybody else that would listen, like, hey, I want that job one of these days. In my 13 years as director, I mean, we've added 2 parks a year during my tenure, and we've been able to preserve over 2,000 acres of open space. And I don't even think about those things as they're occurring. It's after it's all done, then I see that and I'm like, wow, that's pretty cool that we were able to do those kinds of things. But it's not me that did it, it's a team that did it. You know, at some point, I will really look back on the impact we've had over the last 24 years and certainly over the last 13 years. And then I'll appreciate it probably a little bit more. But in the day-to-day grind, I really don't. You know, it's kind of like, that's our job, let's go on to the next thing, you know? And even though it's had some tremendous impact on the community, we're ready to move on to the next thing and do something else really cool for the community.
Do you have a favorite park? Or if I said, all right, Doug, we got a day, where are we going?
I would take you to Esther Simplot. And the reason why is that transformation of that aquatic complex, I refer to it as, is just so unique and amazing. There's nothing like it in the world where you have adjacent to the river 2 in-river whitewater parks, surfing and kayaking parks inside the river. You've got Quinn's, which was transformed with a beach area that then has great synergy with ponds 1 and 2 of Esther Simplot. You got Friendship Island out in the middle of a pond. I mean, we just look at that complex and what it offers to the community, and it's swimmable ponds that we monitor for safety reasons. There's nothing like it in the world, from frontline to our leadership team to really make this a world-class system. And it also takes, you know, like, to throw a plug in for my wife. I mean, it takes a home life, certainly has a big impact on the success of your, you know, work life. And she's been a great supporter of everything I've done over the last 24 years with this department, and couldn't do it without her, and couldn't do it without my family's support as well. So it's been a lot of fun. It's going to be great to enjoy retirement. But I anticipate things continuing to go to the next level well after Doug Holloway's gone.
And Doug Holloway is still all business. He actually had about an hour-long conversation with me at the park this afternoon. We talked a lot about the future of Boise Parks and Rec, as well as some major upgrades that are ongoing and still to come in the Parks and Rec department. And Brian, we're gonna have an extended interview and profile on the state of Boise Parks and Rec coming up this Sunday morning, 9 a.m. on our Viewpoint program. They're making significant progress on this pretty major goal of having a park walkable within 10 minutes of everyone's neighborhood in the city of trees. If you look across the country, a goal like that is just not something that's put out there.
It's pretty awesome, yeah.
It's amazing. So we talk about some of the micro parks and some of the expansions. Another conversation I really love that we have on Sunday, the compare and contrast between pools and splash pads.
Oh, okay. Is that difficult to compare and contrast?
Yes,
I can see the difference.
there are benefits, and there are in the world of splash pads and pools. There's a lot to talk about.
Okay, well, I would agree with Doug on this. Once they figured out that circulation at Esther Simplot, it is one of the best parks in the city.
Not a bad place to surf either.
Exactly. All right, thanks, Joe. All right, they've been called the barometer of the West. The presence of the sage grouse says a lot about the land we share. But for years, we've heard concerns about that land being shared also by grazing cattle. And the question is, can they coexist? Well, as Hunter Funk found out, the findings of a 10-year-long study now gives us an answer, one that was expected by some, but not really expected by all, correct?
Yeah, there were conflicting studies at the time, right? People just wanted to know what this was about. For as long as ranchers have grazed cattle in the West, sage grouse have been part of the background. But in recent decades, as the bird's numbers fell and its habitat shrank, many wondered, could the cows be part of the problem? So they set out to find an answer. Not in the lab, but out in the sagebrush sea near Bruno. It was a 10-year effort, 75,000 acres, dozens of scientists, and thousands of nesting birds. Now, the goal was to understand whether springtime cattle grazing disturbs the nesting habitats of sage grouse.
So when cows and grouse are out on the landscape together, particularly in the spring, the grouse are looking for a place to nest, to hide and cover and ensure that their nest is protected. So typically the grouse will go underneath the sagebrush and tuck back into where the grass is thick and tall underneath the brush. Whereas a cow, she's gonna go for the easiest thing to eat. So she's gonna browse the inner spaces. And that was one thing that the study really focused in on, was where the utilization was taking place with the cow.
The study, let me try this again. The study, what's good for the herd is good for the bird. That's what it figured out. In other words, they're not stepping on each other's toes or nests. Grouse are more focused on nesting under thick brush. Cows eat what's open and easy. Different needs, same range. Well, coming up at 6, we're going to show you how the finding could reshape how Idaho and the West manages public lands and where researchers are turning their focus now that the study is wrapping up. Brian?
What's good for the herd is good for the bird. I like that saying. So, I mean, that applies to everything. Everything kind of figures out where they fit in, I guess.
Exactly. Well, and it's, they mow down the grass a little bit and they were concerned, right, that some of the eggs were exposed.
Sure.
But they learned they don't really care. And if they were looking around the land, they're like, oh, that one's empty, doesn't have as much grass around, but they'd still pick it, so.
Probably not as, I guess, invasive as hunters with guns.
Yeah, that's a fact.
That's true. All right. Thanks, Hunter. We'll see it at 6.
Well, we are in the middle of a scorching Tuesday afternoon. Triple digits across the Treasure Valley as expected. We're at 102 in Boise, Nampa, and Mountain Home right now. Caldwell the hottest at 103 degrees. We're in the upper 90s in the Magic Valley, well into the 80s up in the mountains. So a hot Tuesday evening coming our way. We are seeing some storm activity across northeast Oregon and some storms trying to initiate over the central mountains. Look like there's a lightning strike right there east of Cascade. Treasure Valley should not see impacts from these storms outside of potentially some gusty winds this evening, but for the most part, heat really is our headline for the rest of tonight. Tomorrow, still a hot one, not as hot, but then we see much more widespread storm activity possible in the afternoon and evening. That has triggered a widespread fire weather warning across all of eastern Oregon and pretty much all of southern Idaho for the afternoon and evening hours tomorrow. So it is a first alert weather afternoon tomorrow for potential impacts to outdoor activities and the increased fire danger. We're talking gusts up to 60 60 miles per hour potentially at a 60-mile-per-hour gust. That makes that storm severe. That's another reason we're issuing first alert conditions tomorrow. Lightning strikes on dry fuels could start new fires, and blowing dust tomorrow likely a big concern. So poor visibility expected to also impact anyone who is traveling across the area tomorrow. Not everyone is going to get hit with a storm, but they will likely bubble up in the afternoon and evening at the hottest part of the day. So just something to plan for if you are going to be spending time outdoors on Wednesday. We'll hit the mid-90s tomorrow in the Boise area, so a little bit cooler still on Thursday, but the heat is back with 90s coming our way from Friday all the way through next week.
Well, Chuck in Boise wants to put the blame directly on the West Ada School Board, saying the West Ada Board seems to not care a damn about the kids. Their focus is all about politics and have failed our children. They have great teachers, but they're also driving them out. Shame on them. Meanwhile, Karen in Garden City says, I'm a voter that never really paid attention to school board elections. I am now. Leaving on Doug Holloway's retirement. Doug Holloway has been a faithful and selfless community servant for many years. His influence will be missed. That's from one Doug to another. Just passing that along, and thanks for sending that in. Okay, so Lauren in Sun Valley wants to know, does this mean that the city of trees will become the city of parks now that they keep adding more parks around the city of Boise? I doubt it, because you know what? We'd have to change the flag, and you know how well that went last time, so there's a good chance we're going to stick with the city of trees, at least for the foreseeable future. We'll see you tomorrow.
Continue with us and watch free now on the KTVB Plus app everywhere you stream.